Okay, we will begin our city council meeting for March 27th. We'll have a call to order. Ms. Valerie.
Councilor Dodds is absent. Councilor Felton.
Here.
Councilor Pollard is absent. Vice Mayor Morgan.
Here.
And Mayor Hickman.
Here. Okay. We have a quorum, so we will begin with line item number 3, presentation discussion on the citywide pavement assessment and plan for roadway improvements, including presentation, discussion, review, and/or consideration of technical memorandum, recommendations, costs, funding options, timelines, and street improvement prioritizations, and possible action to direct further inquiry. Mr. Jacob.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Back in September, the City Council had its strategic retreat and identified roadway improvements as its number one priority. The first step the council took in that process was having Cowan Group Engineering conduct a pavement assessment of all the roadways within the city of Eufaula. And Michael Taylor's here to present on that and to start this process. And then after that, we'll have our financial advisor present on different funding options on how we can make that a reality.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on I'm here to present the pavement evaluation. All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
A little overview. I was just going to talk about the project scope and then some understandings from the finding or from the assessment, our findings in the assessment, go over some recommendations, and then we'll open it up for questions. So our scope was to analyze street conditions throughout the city of Eufaula within the corporate boundaries, which included 38 centerline miles of road, 37 of which are asphalt, and 1 mile non-continuous of concrete. We also have some gravel streets within the boundary that are not included in the assessment, but are included in the GIS updates for the mapping. So we also did data gathering and assessment, pavement condition rating. We're providing a database, which I'll talk a little bit more about its usefulness here in a little bit, as well as provide pavement management plan and a report to be included, which you guys have in front of you. So how do we get all that data? This is our van that we use. It does the inventory and inspection for us and puts that all in a cloud that we can run through our software and get the information that we're looking for, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. It also does 360-degree imagery at 20-foot intervals. So we have pictures of every point that we took, as well as where that's located through GPS positioning. And the big metal boxes on the front and back are laser measurement tools. So it shoots a beam down at the street and it can see the cracks. It can see where it's not level. And we also have roughness indicators within the van, so it can read how much it's bouncing. So what are we really looking for? And I'm not going to go over all these. I don't want you guys to fall asleep, but alligator cracking, it looks like an alligator's back. You guys have probably seen it, and a lot of times that's where we have water sitting or moisture underneath the road in the soil, and that causes the asphalt to start falling apart in that pattern. Rutting is where you might feel tire tracks, and that's just due to traffic flow and the asphalt failing under tires. And then this picture is actually from the analysis, and that's longitudinal and transverse cracking. So you have long cracks running through the pavement at different directions along with the traffic. Patching is where we have patches where we've had failure in the past, and then edge cracking is where it's fallen off the edge on like our open sections where we don't have sidewalks. And then full distortion is where it's just completely pushing away from a location. So with all of that information that we're gathering, we have ratings for the streets that helps us to analyze and come up with either is it in good condition or excellent condition. And that's called our pavement condition index. And we rank that from 0 to 100. Anything in the excellent to good range, you can usually come back through for maintenance and provide overlays or mill and overlay because the structure's still in good condition. So when we get into the fair and marginal or below fair, you typically have to do a full depth replacement because the structural stability of that road's no longer there. So if you were to mill it and fill it, you would probably be coming back pretty quickly because failure would come through that fill. So I talked a little bit about the database and what that tool is. This is just a little snippet of the first page. And the whole database, or not whole database, but a good portion of the database is part of the appendix of your report, the last few pages. But it's a tool in the end that we can use to track our capital improvements. As we make an improvement to a road, you go in and change the PCI on it and it falls down in the ranking where we hide all the good condition streets.
Where's this located in this packet here?
The very last pages are Appendix E. And this is a tool that we're going to give to city staff that they can use to track as we move forward in the future. So I already saw you looking at the graph a little bit. So what did we really find here? What's the overall rating? The pavement condition index is an average of 31, which leaves a backlog of 83%. So that the backlog is anything that's below a 40 PCI, which is a lot of that red on the graph that you saw. The national municipal average for pavement condition indexes is 60. And that's also actually from the analysis, and the software that we use highlights the cracks and helps us to analyze what condition that's in. So there's the graph from your report. Lots of red, I know. It gives us a baseline of understanding for what we have to do, though.
Well, that's understanding, yeah.
So good portion of our analysis found very poor to poor condition, some marginal, and then some excellent. We have a brand new road over by the casino.
12%.
Yeah.
Just ate our room.
Oh,
What's that look like on a map? Oops, sorry, double clicked. And we have maps of actually what's in the presentation up here, and afterwards, I'd be glad to have you guys come up, look at the maps and talk through any questions you have. But you guys span quite a bit of area for your corporate boundary already, so there's a lot of roads to consider. So how do we come up with recommendations for improvements now that we know where we're at? So we take a baseline. What's it going to take to get to 90 right away? That's the blue line on there that shoots up. That's 1 year's worth. And that's $25 million. We could get to a 90 PCI in 1 year, and then it'd start coming back down without maintenance. So we spread this out over 5 years, looking at what costs we think could really help you out. And we start by setting a PCI rating we're trying to reach. Is it 60, the national average? Or do we want to just kind of keep where we're at 31? What's that going to cost? And we break that down. So we came up with 2 budgets, and I'll talk a little bit about those here in a little bit, that we think are good goals to have. And I'll talk about those and what their PCI overall ratings are. But one thing that we know could help is identifying where can we do some overlays and who can we have help us with that. So we reached out to the Muskogee Creek Nation, and they are willing to look at up to 2 miles with us. If we'll identify it, they'll come out and do that work with their roads department. All we have to do is submit that on their portal for grants. Yes, sir.
Is that total, or is that like for a year, or is that?
So that's That's a total, and they said they could get started as early as this summer if we can get that in with them.
Okay, thank you.
And so we tried to pick roads that span as far as we can across the entire city, like long stretches. So we'll make improvement for a long thoroughfare rather than trying to pick out a bunch of different blocks and patch it together. And that we have that map up here as well.
I'm sorry, like with that, is it just a road or is it also like a road sidewalk?
Just roads. So they would come through, scrape the top pretty much,
Okay.
and then put a 2-inch overlay on it.
Gotcha.
And one thing that kind of held us back there, we had to pick an open section road. We couldn't really pick a curbed road because one problem we have throughout town is where there's been overlay on curbed roads, there's been a lot of overlay and there's not much curb left. So I'd turn in, if you want to get back down to your gutter and your curb, that turns into almost a full depth replacement because you're pushing so much asphalt out. It could be up to 6 or 8 inches just to get down to a base.
So in order to do the overlay, it has to be a road that's not in the poor to very poor range, right?
Yeah, it has to, we really prefer it be above 40. Yeah, but yeah, poor and very poor.
And we
is-
have
is
one
below.
long street in town that's at
So-
that level?
These may still fall into the poor or marginal, but we actually drove around to find ones that are of a caliber or above 40, because 40 to 50 still can fall into marginal or poor. But we assessed, we feel that we can still overlay these and come up with a good product with some minor patching before overlaying.
Okay.
So our first recommendation for improvements is a budget of 1.6 million per year. And that would be an overall project of 7.95 million in construction or 51,610 linear feet of roadway full depth replacement. The little bit of mill in there. We've actually, in the analysis, already assumed that we're going to do the mill and fill, so these will be different streets that we would do that on. Keep double clicking on you guys. This is the map of what those streets would be based on year, so it's color coded by year. We have it up here too for better reading, but it covers a pretty good portion of town. That is also a map that's in the report. But the 3.2 million a year would be overall 5 years, $15.9 million or 104,000 feet of replacements. And this one would put our PCI up to, I think it's 70. As you can see from the map, it covers quite a bit more ground for improving our PCI and the roadways.
On the first one, what did you say the PCI was?
60.
Nah, if you're gonna quote, sorry.
35? Does it About double.
Yeah, so the 3.2 million per year gives us a PCI of 67 total at the end of 5 years. And then the 1.6 gives us a 44. I know that's a lot of numbers, but really the overall recommendation from our findings is to find as many partnerships for improvements as we can. We understand that fixing roads is expensive, and there are a lot of resources we have. We've already reached out to Muskogee Creek Nation. Jacob and I have been talking about getting with the county and seeing what kind of program we could get together. I know in other towns, if if the city buys the materials, the county will use their equipment to come out and work on roads. So we're definitely going to reach out to them. We're also going to reach out to our council of local government, see if there's any CDBG grants we can get for improvements, as well as federal and state programs. We know that ODOT has a couple of programs that we could possibly utilize, as well on the higher federal highway transportation initiatives. The other big thing we need to do is prioritize our PCI improvement and set a goal. What is the goal? Do we want to reach 60 and be like everybody else? We can't set that for you guys, but we do want to have an open conversation and kind of get a plan together. Let's set this goal of, even if it's 50 or 44, like the 1.6, let's set it, and then we can figure out a plan how to get there. And with that, we would institute our approach to that, and from there, we could probably better pursue funding with the report that we have and talking through with the funding agencies and letting them know we have a plan.
You started to tell us what the end number was if we went to that 70 PCI goal.
I'm sorry.
And my question is the difference between 67 and 70. Is that,
Oh, well, I apologize. Off the top of my head, I knew the 3.2 was close to 70 PCI. It's actually 67. So to get to 70, you're probably 3.5. So short and sweet. I really feel like sometimes looking at the maps kind of helps as you guys have questions, and I'm here to answer any others you might have.
can you give us an idea on that first year if we went with the higher end plan? What roads do you see us working on? Like, what are the major roads that we would be working on?
In year one,
Where are you looking at that?
I'm going to look at the big one.
Oh, okay.
So on the big plan, in year one, we would be doing all of Front Street.
Front Street,
Uh-huh.
Most of Lake Shore. Memorial Drive or Memorial Road,
Which just means that they can use
Pine Street. L Street.
When you picked these, were you looking at roads that were the most damaged or the ones that were the most driven?
So the way that the database or the ESA works is it tries to find where your dollar is going to be best spent. We got to catch that road before it falls into the poor or marginal.
Yeah.
And so we kind of try to take bias out of it by using the condition of it. And so we're not just focusing on the condition of it, but also the backlog, because you want your backlog to come up or down while your PCI comes up. So we'll sprinkle in some of those marginal to poors to help with the PCI, but the most important is not letting them fall into that range.
Okay.
And as part of the Muskogee Nation partnerships, they said that they can do about 2 miles of more extensive road repair and improvement, but that would have to be programmed into their 3 to 5 year capital improvements. So that's what the mayor was asking about, the potential for Front Street, because that is in their inventory. So that is an option. And so it would just come down to a matter of timing and prioritization. If we had funding available that could allow us to pursue Front Street sooner, as a city, then that would be an option for the council to consider. But if funding wasn't available, then we could also pursue it through the nation. I think we have some flexibility. And also, since we have so many roadways, we're fortunate that the nation has put so many in their inventory. And my understanding is they're trying to put every road in Eufaula in their inventory, that we have quite a bit of flexibility on that as well. If we end up paving one road, we can put in another road in its place. So,
To keep it moving forward.
mhm.
Yeah, and as we work through this plan, that's what the database will do too. Let's say they did say we're going to fund Front Street. Then we go into our database and they've completed that. So Front Street now has a 90 or 100 PCI. It drops that out of the map and it tells you which one needs to come next.
Pull up now.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Do you all want to either take a break or get up and look at the maps for them while we get them set up for the planning department?
So go ahead.
Yeah.
So at this time, we're going to look at the maps and just kind of get a better visual of it while you get set up.
So this is conditional. This is an overlay. This is.
Looks simple enough. I've never seen that. That's pretty handy there. All right, let me get logged in.
Yeah.
Just move it back to the people. Obviously.
Just like shore ever go underwater. What's that? Just like shore ever go underwater.
That's the corporate boundary.
What color did you say?
Yeah, that's, I would say that to me, that's never, but I heard we can't do grants for that. But I think it's more on the high, like from a soul. But that's what I was really.
You don't have that. We don't have that here.
No, over.
Yes, so we're trying to consider, yeah.
I'm working with. That was I would say. All of it along the road. I will try to find out something, but it's. Here, where you can. And I get it. It's
talking about me?
Yeah, this might be
It's your wife's
actually one we went to the road.
A small little school.
I just learned about this
Those are, that's
today.
the MC.
Very interesting.
Oh,
We'll see how that goes.
We'll send them heart-shaped problems.
oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that would be some good info for us. Mhm.
Is right here.
That's mine.
What is their sales price right now? 9.5?
I think it is.
I think it is.
Yeah.
All in because it's a county.
County line, yeah.
We're at 10%.
Yeah, that's a concrete neighborhood.
But if we went with option 2,
Which is what?
what would be that percentage?
This is the
That's like
transition, so.
heavy
for bright red is,
Higher 3.2.
Let's just go ahead and ask for
Red is
5%.
4%.
And then the purple.
Easy, Tisha. Easy, Tisha.
Establish out your property line.
I actually, the 1% would pay for the 1.6.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what about the 3.2? That's 2%.
This is-
Probably.
We're out of here.
Or actually, if it's only
Yeah,
the
they
city,
did.
I should
They
clarify.
did
If
concrete,
there's
the
only the
county
city
did it a while back.
Yeah.
It's not.
the 1% is the
That's
1%.
plastic.
Okay.
But if you start factoring in Freak Nation and our many other
Oh,
partnerships
okay,
we can go, then that's where we think that maybe
Maybe
get
get
to
to
the
the
3.2.
Okay, okay, that makes sense.
That's our hope.
Okay, that is not a guarantee. I like that.
So
But
I think
I like that a
that
little bit
one
more.
is,
Me too. So Freak Nation is a.
that's one of the things we have to do as part of it too. is clean up.
I think the challenge is, it's not, I don't think it's not that they wouldn't do more, it's having the right parameters for them to do.
That's
And
always,
so that's
yes.
where we have to do some more.
That's not what affects more of their citizens, probably. Maybe.
What was that?
We started
Maybe what
with
roads
thinking you guys
affect
had
more of their
60.
citizens.
No, because as long as it's on their inventory.
Oh,
It's
I see.
on the condition of the road.
So there could be a part of it that we can do with the county
It's
review.
still a lot.
We'll take our rents where we can get them.
Yeah.
Well, and it could be, if it's, maybe they can do the overlay portion, but we have to cover a deeper base repair. For the challenge is, I think they would be open to doing more, but the challenge is finding roads that would actually meet what they could actually do.
Yes, and what they said is, if they really needed to be able to do more, that's what they can really pump out.
Okay.
A patch here or there, like full depth, and dig it up, put some gravel in it, and coming back over it, that's fine, but when we start running into every block having.
So my question was, is like, say we could work with the county on doing part of the road to set it up for coordination.
There's a chance we could do that.
That's-
Yeah,
that's-
Sarah will too.
Okay, that was my question.
Or if the city has the funding to do that part work.
And then try
Yeah,
to,
we could run through and do curb and gutter and base, and then there will, because they're machines that pay, they're the same, it's like.
Yeah.
As long as you have everything ready.
we
I'm
could
sure that we can do it.
like that.
Potential.
Yeah. Got a lot.
So put it out of One road that I did ask him to take a look at was where we had stood out on, when we're doing our big plan. And McKinley and what is the rest of that bill?
Yeah, McKinley and then it,
Yeah, and we said we wanted that to be a main thoroughfare.
yes.
It's on the map as just a simple overlay. And I think for what we were talking about wanting to do there, that's not going to work because we were talking about widening the lanes and adding bike paths.
Because it
and-
kind of does go narrow with that little jog right there.
So that, I think that would be one that we might need to take a look at where it just goes down to the ground and it looks like pretty much a rebuild. But anyway, there, I think you were going to try to talk with them.
Are you talking about that little ramp right there?
I'm just talking about the whole street.
I
because
know
we were
where that
talking-
little concrete ramp, you know how it's just a big hole.
Yeah.
And-
there's-
And that's a great example because that's one that we identified that would be eligible for Muskogee Nation to do, that they could start on this fall.
Really? That would
Yes,
be awesome.
but it would be limited to the current roadway
Oh.
and not the expansion. And so that's the dichotomy that we're in, because we don't have any other funding to enhance it like we would like on the comprehensive plan. So it's, do you make the road better for now, or do you wait for other funding options? So that's a question for council to think about and provide direction on. So,
I do like what you're saying though, Evelyn, with the vision, like we plan and do action with the vision.
Yeah, we need to make what we're doing here work with the vision we're doing there so that we're not having to redo work, some other place and make it cost more.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next, we'll have Chris Wolf from Municipal Finance Services. They've been the city's financial advisors for at least the last 10 years, very trusted. And he's going to walk us through what a GO bond would look like and what sales tax financing would look like for the city.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here. As Jacob said, we've been your financial advisors for a number of financings over quite a few years. Former colleague of mine used to be the one that would come out here, but he has moved on. I won't say to bigger and better things. It's just the exact same thing, but he moved back east to be closer to his family. So Jacob reached out, and we were happy to put together something to come out here and show you guys a couple of different ways that we can finance capital infrastructure, more specifically street projects. We're going to go over two different methods of funding that are common, most commonly used, especially for street projects. One is general obligation bonds, which will go first. Two is basically a private placement or a bank note for a sales tax, an additional sales tax to help pay for it. Both achieve the same goal, but both can operate pretty differently. And so I'm going to try to touch on the high points and go through this presentation. If you have any questions at all, feel free to stop me and we'll leave some time after to ask questions. But I want to walk through this so you have a full understanding of the options available to you. So first one that we're talking about is general obligation bonds. General obligation bonds, as you may or may not know, these are bonds that are funded through issuing the actual general obligation bonds, and they are repaid with a ad valorem property tax that gets levied for these bonds. So why would we choose to go with general obligation bonds first? First one is you get all your funding up front, essentially meaning you set the actual amount that you need and you get the funds needed as you issue the actual bonds. You're not paying as you go. You don't have to nickel and dime your way to funding all you need for the street projects. You actually allow yourself to fund a set amount of projects before you issue the bonds. One feature of general obligation bonds and general obligation bond elections is how we can structure general obligation bond issuance. We'll get into that, but instead of just doing one financing that covers everything, you can, what we call, stagger these issues in order to reduce the burden on your taxpayers and allow you to issue the amount that you need or want over that time period. But it allows for favorable kind of structuring options that can help ease the burden on your taxpayers. Also, with general obligation bonds, you can really quantify the tax impact to each citizen. It is based on the actual value of your home. There's not a ton of math involved in saying what it's going to cost you as a citizen to actually issue these bonds. And so it's a pretty transparent, clear process that you give to your voters in order to make these decisions. Now, because these have to be issued via a public election, everybody has the information they know going into it, what they're voting on and what it may cost them ahead of time before the city makes a decision on what they vote for. So those are kind of the three, key features of why you would choose a general obligation bond. So how do they work? Well, you have to have an election. When you have an election, it's a very transparent process. You set the dollar amount that you're going after. It's not an unknown. You don't just tell your citizens, we're going to do some street projects, please vote for it. You actually set, based on what you're trying to target for what your mill levy impact will be, we'll get into that as well, what you're going to issue. So when the citizens go to vote, they know how much money the city is going to be wanting to take on to fund street projects. And not only that, they know exactly which streets are going into it. So when they go to vote, it's not just a blanket amount for anything that a future council can decide to do something with. These are put on a ballot that is laid out very distinctly and clearly to the citizens. It can't just be streets. They will know what streets and where before they go ahead and vote. Now, we've already gone through just talking about how they're repaid based on property taxes, but the way that we issue general obligation bonds is we do a competitive bidding process. We go through the process of putting together an offering document to banks or to underwriters. And these are sold on a tax exempt basis, meaning you obviously get the benefit of the lower tax exempt rate, and we sell them competitively. And so we get banks from not just local areas, not just the state, but all across the country in order to drive down your cost of borrowing as low as we can. We increase that competition for the interest rate, usually results in the city receiving the most favorable interest rate that they can. There's a couple of other ways to finance capital infrastructure. General obligation bonds are typically the lowest interest cost to a city. And you can also issue these up to 25 years. So you have a long term to repay these. You don't have to try to squeeze it into an amount or a shorter term just to try to satisfy, maybe a private placement lender. So when we talk about how we issue general obligation bonds, and when I'm using words like mill levy, ad valorem, your property tax, here's what you really, need to know. A lot of people can kind of get tripped up on what a mill levy is. A mill levy is basically just a taxing unit. What it means is that it is $1 per $1,000 of the value of your home. And when I say value of your home, when we issue property or we levy for property tax, we don't levy based on the market value of your home. We levy based on the assessed value, which is determined by your county assessor, which is a percentage of what your actual home's market value is. So when we say a mill, we're basically taking $1 for every $1,000 of what your property assessed value is. There's a calculation on the next page to break it down, but that's what we're looking at. Now, these can only be repaid, GO bonds are repaid through property taxes, but they're really for just GO debt, or you have judgments out there. These are not, you cannot really issue a mill levy on your citizens just for general spending or your day-to-day operations. They have to be there has to be a public good behind the actual reason for issuing them. Over here on the right, another reason that taxpayers tend to be favorable towards GO bonds is because you all have certain requirements on actually using the money that you're borrowing. This isn't you can't authorize, $7-8 million of GO bonds and say, well, we'll spend it when we feel like it's right. You have to get a certain amount of money out the door, 5% within 6 months, and you've got to have a majority, 85% of the project complete within 3 years. This allows voters to know that with their tax dollars, you're not just kind of waiting around. So it's important to have projects identified and a plan in place before you consider issuing GO bonds, because once you actually do a GO bond issue, the clock starts ticking and you have got to get the money out the door. So as you have, your plans to fix, your streets or whatever it is that you need to do, your voters know that this money is going out the door. It will be done. It will be done essentially as promised. That's pretty much the reason for those requirements. So when we talked about mill levies, this is what we're talking about. We used a $200,000 home for this. You can kind of scale this any way you want, but if your home is $200,000, the McIntosh County assessment ratio right now for personal property is 11%. So we take 200,000 times 11%. So your assessed value is $22,000. Now, you have a $1,000 homestead exemption that gets taken off that. So what we call your net assessed value would be $21,000. So your $200,000 home is now assessed at $21,000. That is what is actually taxed when we talk about ad valorem mill levies for property tax. So we go over there to step 2, we look at that net assessed value of 21,000. And for this particular issue, we would say it needs to be, we've targeted 15 mills, which means we take 1/1,000th of that 21,000 and we calculate your annual tax. What does that mean? If you have a $200,000 home annually, that's $315. Monthly, $26.25. You can, because of the, basically the way this is all assessed, we use 200,000. That's about the median household value we looked at when we went through property records for Eufaula, but it scales pretty linearly. You could cut it in half. If it's 100,000, you take 26.25, it's $13. If you have a $300,000 house, you add more to that. But that is what it takes. That is what a 15 mill levy does to your property taxes. So let's see what your net assessed valuation has done over the last 15 years. This is the value of all of the property in Eufaula and what it's done over the last 15 years. There's 3 different types of property: real property, personal property, and public service property. Eufaula's seen some fairly steady growth up until here in this last fiscal year of 2025, where there was quite a large jump, but Eufaula had, over the last 10 years, about 5% annual growth for the last 10 years. The reason we show this is because the amount that you can borrow or you can issue increases as your net assessed valuation increases. So as you continue to increase your net assessed valuation, using 15 mills as our example, instead of being able to borrow X amount of dollars, you could borrow maybe, if it goes up by 10% every year for the next 10 years, that number gets bigger and bigger as your property values grow. Now, or you could say we only need a certain amount, and instead of having to levy 15 mills in order to pay for $8 million worth of streets, you may only need to levy 10 mills to pay for it. For this discussion, we've assumed that your rates would grow at about 3.5% for the next 30 years. It's fairly conservative. You guys have been growing over that annually for at least a decade. But the reason we do that, you'll see, is that as your property values grow, you can continue to issue bonds without putting a higher burden than originally planned on your taxpayers. So here's where we come up with our mill target. If we look at, we want to do a street program, we want to issue bonds for streets, and we don't want to hit the taxpayers with more than 15 mills. Remember, that's about $26 on a $200,000 house. What does that get you? This is just math right here. You've got, you could issue 3 bonds over a period of about 12 years and get about $7.8 million in total authorized funds. Of course, there's cost of issuance associated with it. But in construction funds, $7.45 million, we'll call it $7.5 million. So what this is telling you is if you were to go to the voters and authorize about 7 or 8 million for streets, and you inform them that there would be a target mill levy of 15 mills, so that $26 on a $200,000 house, that will get about $7.5 million in funds for streets. And the way we do this is we issue them every 5 or 6 years until that money is spent. Now, you might ask, why don't we just do one issue? Instead of doing 4.3 million now, and then 1.6 million 6 years from now, and 1.9 million 6 years from then. Because if you issue them all at once, we're basing it on your property value today. That would increase that mill levy. So instead of costing $26 a month for a citizen, a homeowner, That could go up to $35 because we are basing that on your current value. When we spread them out and issue them in layers, what we do is allow your property to grow, your value to grow. So when you go to issue the next bonds, your property values are now higher, meaning you don't have to charge as much of a tax in order to repay them. This is kind of how it looks. And this is what, it's a lot of numbers here, but this is essentially how a mill levy schedule would look. The green bar, that would be your very first issue that you would do. Let's just say it's in 27. These are all basically just for illustrative purposes. There's no call to action here. This is just kind of how a typical multi-year bond issue looks like. You see there over on the left, those are our mills. They go up to about 15 on that very first year, and they slowly decrease after that. After about 6 years, when we get to 2033, our property values have grown. We can now issue our second round of bonds, get back up to where it was at 15, and then the process repeats. As those values go down, we think, well, let's do our third issue, go back up to 15, and you slowly go down from 15 to 14, 13, 12, all the way down until it's gone. Now, the hard part about any general obligation issuance for any community is just getting the first one in, because you go from having no levy for a general obligation bond to having, in this case, 15. It's an immediate hit to a taxpayer. You can't really start low and go up because of the way we have to structure general obligation bonds. We can't say we'll start at 1 mil and in 15 years go up to 15, because the way that we structure the bonds is you make level principal payments. I won't get into it, but there's really no mathematical way to do it. You have to start at the beginning. So what we do is when we show general obligation bonds, we show kind of a new window for authorization, which is right there, meaning if you want to continue to be a city that frequently issues general obligation bonds, it's smart not to let those bonds pay off completely and that mill levy to drop to 0 and then come back and hit them with another 15. You keep it at around 15 to 10. And then when you have an opportunity, you maybe go to another election and see if voters want to do that. So what this shows, again, it's about 15 mils is 15.5 is the max. We target 15. And on average, during the time period where all 3 bonds are in effect, it's about a 13 mil increase. So still, again, right around that $24 to $23 property tax range. But as the mills go down, those property taxes do drop, and that's when we add on another layer. A lot of numbers, a lot of process, but that's how we look at it when we look at issuing these.
So you're saying when you reissue it, it's another election and everything?
When you reach, so for this right here, what we're looking at, this is
Yes.
one single election for all 3 bonds.
Gotcha.
What when we're talking about a new authorization window, what we're talking about is if you get to that area of 2041 to 2046, 15 to 20 years from now,
Mhm.
and the city has been, your homeowners have been paying on average a 12.8 mils of property tax. When you get to that window, in order to essentially get more public favor for voting in another general obligation bond, whether it's for streets or whether it's, for really anything the city wants, within certain bounds, it's a lot easier to get a voter to say yes when they know their property tax is going to stay about the same than it is to let it go all the way to 2058, where it pretty much zeroes out, and then ask them, hey, do you guys want another 15 mils added onto the tax? They're going to say, I haven't been paying anything for years. Why would I say yes now?
Yeah.
That's just, again, not necessarily a recommendation at this point, but that's really there to illustrate why also this layering of bonds works for most communities. So instead of kind of resetting the tax on citizens every 10 to 15 years, you keep it at a certain level to where that's kind of the norm. And as you issue bonds and citizens see the impact of it, you get that authorization into that authorization window, people are a little more likely to, maybe approve it. But again, that's why general obligation bonds are a democratic process. The citizens themselves know whether or not what they want, and there's no surprise when they go to the ballot and see City wants 8 million for streets, and they want me to pay 15 mils on my property tax. It's up to you to say yes or no.
It's up to them, yeah.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
So you have residential averages here. What about commercial property?
Well, I mean, it's right here. Well, first, these mills that are right here, this is the mill that applies to everybody. So back on this sheet,
Right, I understand that.
yeah,
Do
this,
you have an average that you would be gathering from the commercial properties? Let's say, what's the average of a commercial property? 500,000?
if it's 500, yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at what the actual commercial property, yeah, we typically go for the residential since usually the residential users, most of them are non-commercial property owners. And so we calculate that for them. But if it's 500,000, let's just say it's 600,000. If it was a $600,000 average commercial property, you take that monthly tax, you triple it. Yeah, there is not a different assessment rate just for theirs. So it's real and personal, which counts for residential and commercial.
Right, okay.
And so if you've got a $600,000 commercial property, this works the same way. Multiply it by 3.
Okay.
Since it's 3 times higher than 200,000. So the math, again, works out linearly in that situation. But yes, in a city where there's a high presence of high value commercial properties, that vote can be a little different than a standard community. So these are the assumptions that we've looked at. Again, in order to minimize the impact on your taxpayers and still fund $7 to $8 million worth of street projects, what we looked at is doing one election that authorizes $7,860,000, and we issue those bonds every 6 years or so. Now, as we, if the city were to pursue this option and you issue that first round next year, which you take the biggest chunk out, which is $4,335,000. If your property taxes, again, we're assuming your property taxes are going to go up 3.5%. If they go up 10% every year for the next 4 or 5 years, which in your case, the last few years, you've gone up on average about 9%, wouldn't be completely out of the norm. You could look and say, well, we don't need to wait till 2033. We can issue those in 2030. Or you can wait till 2033 and issue the same amount, but instead of that mill going back up to 15, maybe now it only goes up to 10. When you go to do this election, you're authorizing not a hard mill levy cap, you're authorizing just a hard dollar amount and the purpose. So after that first issue, you can really, as we do this, when we do bond planning, we're looking at your valuations every year that they come out. If the valuation for whatever reason drops, then we say, maybe we wait till 2034 to issue that second round. Or if interest rates in 2 years get cut in half, even if your property valuations barely go up, but interest rates are now half as low as what they were today, then we say, well, we can issue those now. This is just based on your current situation, one of the more efficient ways to issue the amount that you need while targeting 15 mils. Now, you could say, I only want to target 7.5 mils. I don't want to I don't want somebody to go up 15 mils on their property tax. So $26 on a $200,000 home. I want to cap that at $13 for them. The math works the same. You just cut how much you get in half. So instead of $7,860,000, you'd get $4,430,000 authorized. It's fairly black and white as far as how much you can generate based on what your property tax base is. So, like I said, 3 different issues issued over a period of 6 years. We used interest rates that are a little higher than where they are right now, just for, again, illustrative purposes, not to oversell. And so based on your situation, this is about where we think it would be. So what does it look like if you were to pursue this particular option? These are all the communities that we've picked to be kind of within your not only just your area, but also kind of somewhat matching your size and demographics. And we look at what mill levies are looking like across the state. So, of course, you've got kind of the larger cities, especially the more common general obligation bond issuers of Tulsa, Broken Arrow, and Bartlesville. Theirs are well over 100, 120. But looking closer to your area, when we look at Shakota, McAllister, Okmulgee, and we pulled, Broken Bow, another similar kind of, tourist lake-driven community. not a lot of general obligation bonds issued for towns of your size. One, because especially for a tourist-driven community, really kind of having the lake here, when you issue general obligation bonds, you don't hit visitors really at all.
That's right.
You only hit people that live here.
Yeah.
And when you look at Eufaula and you see, we'll go into it, what your sales tax generates, you would think Eufaula may have 7,000, 8,000 people here. But obviously you only, your population is what it is. You've got about 1,200 households here. Those are the only people that will pay for the streets. And so you're taking on almost a project for a town twice your size as far as dollar amount and making a town half that size pay for it. But that is one way in which you can afford, or not afford, but pay or fund these projects. If you were to add, well, before that, Eufaula, right now, you guys are down there kind of at the bottom three. You've got your current mill levy is 87.55. You have no sinking fund levy. Obviously, you have no general obligation. The median of this group is around 105. And that's what their total mill levy is. That's their mill levy, not just for general obligation bonds, but for everything. If you were to add 15 mills to your levy, that moves you closer to the middle of this group, still, lower middle, but it moves you closer to the middle. It would put your proposed levy at, a little over 102, which is right there with Okmulgee, Perkins. You'd be higher than Shakota, but of course, those are towns that don't have GO bonds. So basically, this is just to illustrate to you, GO bonds are used for towns of your size. It's not a universal thing most communities use, but it is something that communities do use.
Hey, Chris, did you have a printout of these?
The sheets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, is it easier for you guys? Is it kind of?
Probably. Some of these are getting small.
Yeah, let me just pass it out now.
It's so cold.
Have you got the air conditioning on? How about turn the heater on? No, I just turned it.
Just turn it off.
Just turn it off for a while. Hit me on my bald head.
I keep pulling my sweater closer.
I'm holding my own hand.
I got mine in my armpits.
This might be a little easier to read. It's a lot easier to read when it was
I
too
don't
deep
see
in
this
front
in
of
the
my face.
internet. I don't see it on here. No, wait.
Oh, you got sales tax. Let me get you
I think the sales tax would be the thing to do because not only the citizens paying for it, but the people come in and pay for it.
I want to
too.
see what kind of money we could get on the sales tax.
But I don't think people would ever vote for that.
Tisha, I was looking up a few of the property values. Nichols is 1.4, Allsups is 1.45. So theirs would be around 2,200 a year at that mill levy. Casey's was 1.12, so theirs would be around 1,700. McDonald's was 678,000. Sharps was 186,000, but Lake Life right next door was 300,000. So downtown Bank of Eufaula was also around $1 million. So it just tended to vary.
Okay.
But I figured Nichols and Allsups and Casey's would be maybe our largest ones.
And I just paid, I finished paying off mine. It was almost $4,000
Mhm.
for the.
Are you just talking sales tax right now?
Property tax.
Property tax.
She had asked what the commercial assessed values were, and that's what I was reading off. Sorry.
Gotcha.
That's fine. Thank you, Jacob, for that information.
All right, these last two slides, these are really more informational. This is essentially kind of the standard calendar for how a GO bond works. It's not a quick process. It can take, 4 to 6 months because one, you've got to define your projects. You cannot make, You can't have on the ballot something overly vague. You can't just say streets. So you need to define the actual project types, the location of the projects, as well as what those cost estimates are, and kind of set out the actual parameters of it. And then we go to an election date, and we have to have, obviously, when we want to file an election, we have to have a resolution due a couple months before that. And then once that happens, you have the election, and if the election passes, then we start the actual work on issuing those initial rounds of general obligation bonds. It's important to get that started as quick as possible in order to, one, kind of act in good faith of the public that you're doing something with the money you're now going to be levying for them, and two, getting that money out the door quick gets you the biggest chunk early. And then, after that, you sell the bonds, you close, you receive the funds all at once. Start your project. After that, that's when you begin making your levy. And so that's general time frame of how an actual election and general obligation bond issuance works. Like I said, about 4 to 6 months from the time you decide to actually do it to the time you got money in your hand. And these are just interest rates. This is something that we usually try to include so you can kind of see what it's looked like the last year. I won't go too deep into it, but when we look at UFALA, we look at what we think the interest rate UFALA would get. We would deem you guys a single A credit at this point. If this is something the city decides to pursue, we would obviously go a little deeper, cover if we want to do, a rating, or if we want to get it insured. But right here, as you can see, interest rates, they've been up, they've been down, and they've kind of leveled out to where they are. This is just what it's looked like for the last 12 months. So again, more informational, but usually people ask at some point, what kind of interest rate will we look at? And this is what we point them to. So that's general obligation bonds. That took about 30 minutes, so I won't say in a nutshell, but you hit too many high points and then you might confuse more people. But that's our look at general obligation bonds. So let's talk about sales tax. This is the other option that you can use to fund projects like streets, is by issuing an additional sales tax on top of your existing local sales tax levy. So what is your current sales tax structure? Right now, you guys have a local tax of 3.5%. Your first 2%, those are general pennies, meaning they're just for kind of public support of the government, operations, city functions. They're have virtually no restrictions on them. You use them as you see fit. Those are permanent. Those are not going away. As long those two aren't going away. Your 1 cent, your other 1 cent, is also not going away. It was originally used for healthcare and hospital facilities, but after that debt has retired, it is available for, again, pretty much anything. It's essentially a general penny. That is also permanent. You have 3 pennies that will always be here, and they will not be going away. Now, you have another ½ cent to make up the 3.5. That was for capital improvements and debt service. That ½ cent is not permanent. It is scheduled to expire here in about 6 years, January of 2032. Now, at this point, you all obviously haven't had a sales tax extension on this, but this is a ½ cent that will go away if the voters do not come in and say, we want to have an extension on this tax. Now, when that time comes, you can decide to extend it for 15 years, 20. You can decide to make it permanent. You can decide to make it for something completely different, but it needs to be extended if you want to keep it.
Question, Jacob, someone might help me. The county has a 2%.
Mhm.
They can't go any higher than 2%. Is that right?
On the 2% cap, yes,
Yeah, that's as tall, that's as much as they can go.
2%.
That's what I've always understood.
Yes, now the county can, they'll still have elections because theirs aren't permanent and they'll go
What
back for another
What
one.
to do right now is another ½ cent to continue it.
Continue the existing ½ cent, yes. And that's what this city would need to do to continue this ½ cent, because it is going to go away. And so when that time comes,
But the city, even though we're at 350 and Summers at 4, can you go above that?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
there's-
But
yeah.
But the county can't.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
yes, and so when we're looking at it, we're looking at your 3.5 cents that you have total.
Yeah.
Half of that, or 1/2 cent is going away in 6 years without extension, or, extension, or you can make it permanent. You don't have to have it just for another 15 years. You also have, you're one of the many towns, obviously, that has a use tax. You levy use tax, it mirrors your sales tax. So when I say mirrors, what I mean is if you're going to add, if you want to do a project for street financing and you want to do a 1/2 cent or a full cent, a new tax for an election, once that goes into effect, your use tax will now also be 4% or 4.5%. Use tax, of course, this is what you're spending on, your out-of-state purchases that get brought here, Amazon, whatever it is that you're using. It used to be something that we didn't really, to be frank, care about, because it was mainly when businesses would purchase machinery from out of state and bring it in and amounted to pretty much nothing. But since now most communities levy this use tax with their sales tax, and since Amazon has become as common as anything else, most communities now, it is a large portion of what their actual total tax collections are. And I want to note that because as I continue to talk, when I say sales tax, I do that for brevity purposes. I also mean use tax. You won't have to have a separate election to raise use tax. You just have the one, but use tax goes with it.
I have a question for that. Does the use tax just apply to out-of-state purchases, or is it out of city purchases? Say, for example, someone orders something from Walmart and it's delivered to Eufaula.
Yes, that would be if you bought it on Walmart, if you bought it from Walmart in Shakota
Yes.
and it came here, there's a use tax on that purchase.
Okay,
Yes.
that's good to know.
I don't think I've actually been asked that question before, but most of my towns are a lot more rural and there's not really anything there. So that is being collected anytime basically out of city commerce transaction happens.
Okay.
So those are your 3.5 cents. That's what they're for. You all have several pieces of debt under the Eufaula Public Works Authority that is using revenues generated by these taxes to make the debt payments on those. Pretty much it's not pretty much all of your debt uses revenues from these taxes to pay for that. You also have a use tax note that is only paid for by use tax. Sales tax is not pledged to it. It is completely separate, but I want to really drive home the fact that these 3.5 cents that you have here, I don't want to say they're spoken for, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of debt that use this tax to help make the payments on. It is pledged to those pieces of debt. So as far as you would say, well, why don't we just use some of our existing tax to help pay for these streets? We've already got 3.5 cents. Let's just use that. These 3.5 pennies are fairly spoken for, so to say, at this point. So in order to generate revenue or generate project dollars to do a street project, you would need a new sales tax on top of this. So how do you stack up right now? Right now, you guys are at 10% total sales tax. Not too long ago, 10% was seen as one of the highest rates you could have in the state. Right now, it's still high, but it's getting closer to being kind of the median sales tax rate across the state. We looked at every community in Oklahoma, 567 different taxing entities, and we looked at how you guys stack up, and then we took the ones that we thought might be applicable to you, and we compared you against them. Not surprisingly, in tourist, kind of driven areas, sales tax is not as low as it is maybe in other parts of the state or in more rural parts of the state. When we look at you guys versus, Atoka, Grove, Hugo, Shakota, you guys are all in the 10 to 10.5% range. Because McIntosh County has a 2% tax on top of you, it has almost kind of put an invisible ceiling over your head.
Yep.
Because while your sales tax rate right now, your local rate is 3.5%. There are 300 other communities that have a higher local tax than that. There are not 300 communities that have a higher than 10% sales tax rate. And buyers, when they go to the store, they don't care that Well, it's 2% from the county, so Eufaula's not charging me that. They just see the bill. So when we look at how you stack up, I mean, you guys are right there with every community around here, but as far as the median goes, you guys are on the middle to higher end of sales tax. Right now, you're at 10%. 10.5% to 11%, there are only 32 communities that have a sales tax rate of 10.5 to 11. That's not a lot. But
Most of those are larger communities.
you know, some of them are larger, but a lot of them, you do get like, you know, there's a couple that have an 11.5% sales tax rate, but they're in the middle of nowhere. I'd actually never even heard of them before I saw that. And they have to charge that just to keep things going.
Yeah.
So you guys you're at 10%. There is technically upward mobility as far as what you can do, but it's something to consider when you look at what everybody else around you is charging. Now, that being said, again, your local rate is not really, I mean, you're on the middle to lower end of where a local rate is, which is the money you can use. And so regardless of what the county's rate is, you guys need money to actually have for the city on this. So we looked at what your sales tax collections have looked like over the last 10 years. Pretty steady growth on actual sales tax. It was, relatively flat through COVID. After COVID, it kind of exploded. And again, you've gone back to pretty steady growth. I will say that right now through today, for fiscal year 26, you guys are slightly down. You know, we would consider that, you know, you're down by, 1.6%. We consider that flat. We'll see how the rest of the year shakes out. But for this analysis, we did not project any growth in sales tax. We projected that this is as much as you'll ever make. 2025, those are your maximum collections for the next 15 years. So obviously you can see use tax down there. Like I said, a decade ago, we would never even look at use tax. It used to bring in $100,000 to Eufaula. Now it's bringing in close to $500,000 into Eufaula. So over here on the right is a chart I really want to point out. This is what we call a per capita comparison. Is what we look at is what does 1 penny of sales tax, or 1 penny of sales tax generated, what does that mean per person for your community? So when we think about that, is what we look at is the reason we do this is to see, are you generating per person here what you should be, or are you generating more, or are you generating less? Eufaula per person generates on 1 penny of sales tax about $311 per person. The median for the entire state is about $160. You guys are generating per person about twice as much. What that tells us, just by obviously looking at the numbers and knowing the community, is we don't think people here spend twice as much as everywhere else. That tells us almost guaranteed, obviously, most of your sales tax dollars come from tourism, come from visitors. And so when we talk about burden sharing, when we're talking about financing, we talk about how do we spread the burden. On a property tax issue like a general obligation bond, you're spreading it with people that live here and own property. On a sales tax issue, you're spreading it to the thousands and thousands of people that come here every weekend in the summer.
That's good.
And so when we look at it like this, we have to do this exercise because we want to see how much tourism. I don't know how much tourism comes through Eufaula. I can read Chamber of Commerce reports, but I don't know. Do they come here and stay at their house in the lake and then never go shopping? Obviously not. But we use this to decide how much is this going to impact people that live here versus how much would it impact people that actually travel through here. And looking at the numbers, you guys, and you see these are the top 15 communities with the highest sales tax per capita. They're the people you would expect. Chakota, Atoka, Grove, Medill, out by Lake Texoma. These are towns that are either right next to a lake or they are right off a turnpike, right off a highway, a major travel stop. So it puts you all into this category to where your sales tax is generated mainly by out-of-towners. So if we were to do a sales tax election, what does that get us? If you all wanted to go up 1/2 cent, have a sales tax election for 1/2 cent penny for 15 years, and we did a 15-year bank financing, you could get about $3.2 million for street projects. And so what we look at is, the reason we come to that number is because what we have to have is a sufficient coverage, meaning we know a half cent of sales tax will probably, or half cent of sales and use will bring in about $485,000. That needs to be 150% of what your debt payments would be, because the bank is going to want to know that their debt that they have taken out on you is going to be secure for 15 years. So when we back into the number, if you're generating $485,000 in sales and use tax, that means you get $3.25 million of dollars to issue a loan for street projects. And this would be an election in which a sales tax is issued that is specifically for debt purpose and capital improvements. And you could have it just for streets. You could just say debt service capital improvements, but this is how it looks. Over to the right, what we have is our schedule. We've got 15 years there, and we have revenues. Those are your sales and use tax dollars. Debt service, that would be the payments on a 15-year banknote at today's rates. Then we have a surplus. Because we're getting you what I said is 150% coverage, meaning we're not levying a tax that is just enough to make the payment because the bank wants that security. We do have a surplus because if we did a half cent, you generate $485,000, your debt service would be $325,000, meaning you're surplusing $160,000 extra dollars a year over your debt service. That's money that you can use for the streets. You could do pay as you go. As that money accumulates over the next 15 years, it accumulates to about $2.4 million. These are broad numbers, but this is how it looks. When you're doing a sales tax election, you're not saying, we're charging an additional half cent and we're only going to get $3 million. You get the $3 million for your streets, but you also accumulate another $2.5 million from that excess. You could save that up. You could do pay-as-you-go projects. You could reallocate it to other street projects, but that's kind of how we look at a sales tax issue. 1 cent sales tax. This gets us to as high as we can get realistically on project dollars and what your sales tax can be. 11% is what we at this point are somewhat considering no man's land around the state. It's not going to be no man's land forever, and we will see more communities trend towards that direction, but it would not be worthwhile to show you guys what a 2% increase would look like. So 1% is our cap. This gets you $6.6 million for street projects. This is roughly equivalent to what the GO bond issue gets you. It's about $1 million less, but this is as close as we can get when comparing them. What this means is 1 cent brings in $970,000 on a $6.8 million loan. Those are the debt payments. We show the same type of stuff. It's still the same level of cushion and surplus that you have, but now it's higher because you're levying 1 cent. Everything's doubled. After 15 years, you would accumulate close to $5 million or $320,000 or so a year. Again, money you can use as you see fit when it comes to streets. So what does this mean to the actual citizens? What does this cost them? You could do the simple math of saying, what's 1 cent going to cost me? And you could just say, I spend $1,000 a month at stores, so 1 cent's going to cost me $10. But we want to look at exactly what, because when we show GOs, we can show to the penny what it's going to cost you based on whatever your home value is. But it's a little trickier to do it when we're talking about taxable purchases. And we don't know what everybody buys here. So what we did is we just did some analysis on what the standard or typical resident would use here. We looked at the last 4 years of, they call it NAICS data for sales tax, basically sales tax broken down by category. And we identify, based on patterns and trends, what we think is a reasonable assumption for what your residents bring in versus what a tourist or a non-resident or a local business brings in when they make their purchases for their business. Like I said, when we started, you guys generate $311 per person when a town of your size typically, the median's 160 or so. A town of your size typically generates about $100 a person. all things, equal. So when we kind of ran through all of the numbers and we looked at where is this money going? When is the money coming in? Most cities, when we look at their 12 months collections, November, December, January, are the highest months no matter what, because that's Christmas. In Eufaula, May, June, July, August, September, highest months no matter what. So I can't guarantee it, but I can be pretty sure that most of that isn't just from people loving the heat and getting out and shopping more. That is your tourism expenditures. You're one of the only towns I've seen where your summer months are higher than your Christmas months every single year for like 12 years that we looked at. So a lot of people would look at this and say, well, there's no way our citizens are only, contributing 25% to our sales tax. We've got to be contributing more. Some months, some years you might have closer to 30% of a share. Some years it might be 20%. But looking at it, if you were to say that 25%, when we kind of run it out, that means that your average citizen here is spending about $1,500 to $1,700 a month on total in-town sales and internet sales, and not citizen, household. And so when we looked at all the math, after looking through everything, that's $400 on groceries, $200 eating out, it's $100 on clothes, it's, your internet, your bills. You guys line up with the actual, United States median for what a person in Eufaula or a household in Eufaula with your median household income spends each month. What that means to you is if you do a half-cent increase, the average taxpayer sees a $8.89 increase. That means on a 1%, you double it, it's $17.79. That's average over a year. We're not saying you're going to spend $1,779 a month every month, but over an average, that's about what you would expect to see. Some years that will be a little bit higher, depending on spending habits. Some years that's a little bit lower. But most of the money for the projects in this situation comes from out-of-town visitors to help pay for the debt. It's still an impact. You're generating about $6 million for streets and being charged, $17.79 as a tax burden versus $7.5 million for streets and $26 on property tax, but this is how it looks. And so we put this together to show what the average household would see here. But again, the math is fairly simple if you want to do it in your head. If I spend $1,000, it's 1% more, I pay $10 more. If it's half cent, I pay $5 more. But on a more realistic basis, this is what we would think we would see per household. So how do you guys stack up if you were to do this? We've got your current, right there in kind of the gold writing. If you guys obviously go up a half cent, now you're right there with Atoka, Holdenville, Grove. If you had a full cent, you'd be up there at the top in this community comparison. There are towns that have a higher than 11%, but they're outliers that you can't really compare yourselves to. Again, we're talking very rural areas that have to charge that, but it should be noted that obviously adding the sales tax increase percentages on would put you in the upper category, regardless of which communities we're comparing
I'm
to.
seeing where our neighbor Shakota's got 10.5.
Mhm.
Of course, they got Walmart and Flying J.
Mhm.
So they revenue, maybe twice as much as we do sales tax, or almost twice. So anyway, yeah.
Not quite twice as much, but at least $1 million more,
Yeah.
maybe 1.5. And we're 3.125 million a year in sales tax.
So, and when we looked at, what does adding a half cent do? We add a half cent. If that is what you choose, that moves you from 3.5 to 4. Or if you chose a penny, a full cent, it moves you from 3.5 to 4.5. Jacob and I had talked yesterday, and he had kind of brought this up, is what does that do when we look at every city across the state that has gone from 10 to 10.5 or 10 to 11? What does that do to taxable sales? Do we see a decrease? Unfortunately, this is somewhat of a untrodden area as far as cities of your size that go from the 10 to 10.5. Shakota's at 10.5. They've been at 10.5 for what feels like forever. If we go all the way back, it doesn't make any sense to analyze buying patterns for them because that was years and years ago. Looking at just a few of them. There were about 3 or 4. We had Hobart, Wewoka, Nowata that have gone up at least 0.5% into this range that we decided were comparable enough to at least discuss.
That's mostly smaller communities.
Smaller communities that are either right off a highway or near, a lake of some sort, but again, there's not a lot to pick from when you get up to this high of a sales tax. And so when we looked at those 3, what we looked at is I went in and I looked at what were their 12 months of collections before they increased and what were their 12 months of collections after. And when I say that, I mean, what were their taxable sales before? What were their taxable sales after? Did that impact buyer patterns? Every community is different. And all 3 of those, I think Wewoka stayed flat. Hobart was up 6%. And I think Nowata went up 12%, but that was an outlier from one single month. So even with the tax, it didn't quite impact buying patterns. But again, there have been a couple here recently that have just done this, but we don't have the data to see how it affects them yet. It hasn't been long enough. And with Eufaula being where it is, it's a useful comparison, but at the same time, Hobart doesn't have a Shakota just 10 minutes north of them that they have to worry about losing business to. So measuring their buying patterns might not be directly comparable, but in this situation, like I said, we're getting into untrodden territory with where we are at on our sales tax rates with 10.5, 11. It's not going to be untrodden for long, but it is right now. There's just not a ton of comparison to make. Here's just a calendar. Works very similarly to how a GO bond works. You would have a sales tax election. You would outline the purpose of what it's for. You would outline whether it's permanent, what the time frame is, and then we go through the whole rigmarole of planning the election, having the election, and then after that, doing the financing. That is a lot. Not the most entertaining, what feels like 4 hours of our lives here. But I'm happy to answer any questions and just wanted to give you guys just a look at where you are right now and what you could do to help tackle the projects that Michael.
I do appreciate your information. That's very beneficial. So thank you
Absolutely.
very much
Sure.
for that presentation. Any other questions?
No, my brain is on fire.
I do appreciate the research in that. I mean, that is very good information. So thank you.
Helps to know what
course.
we're voting for.
Mr. Jacob.
Yes, I was hoping that council would have some discussion and provide some direction to staff. even.
On specifically like on how we want to move forward with an election or?
No decision has to be made, but maybe a temperature check on things. And if,
I'd be more interested in going with the sales tax because not only the citizens, we have to pay the tax, but also the visitors that come in. Our only problem with that is that the last election we had for sales tax, we had, 1,200 registered voters in the city. We had 210 that voted,
Yeah.
110 no, 100 yes. So our problem with the sales tax is we're going to have to do some work of letting the public know what's going on and what they can do.
I definitely believe with all the work that we've been doing and putting out in the public and with the groups that we've been working with, being part of becoming part of the community, I think that not only does our population want the roads fixed, but they know we're not going to be able to do it for free. I think my question is like the difference between the 0.5 cent or the penny sales tax up against the bond issue. Do I want to pay another $250 or $300 on my house every year? I don't. But at the same time, which one of these programs is going to get this overall job done faster? Is the penny sales tax going to be enough for us? Because I think the difference we were talking about was possibility of $7 million or $3 million versus.
If you were to do a 1 cent increase versus a GO bond, it's about $1 million in project dollar difference. As far as GO bond will get you close to 7.5. A 1 cent sales tax will get you about 6.5. million of project dollars.
Jacob, how many, we have some kind of record of renters in our population or inside of, how many renters do we have? In other words, if you got 1,200 households, how many of those households are renters that don't own their property?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I do believe Friesen Nichols had an estimate of that though. So I could find that out and get that back to council.
I'm just guessing. The reason I even break that up, I'd say the people that rent like that don't know on anything.
Mhm. I don't want to give a wrong number, but I think it was a significant, at least 30%.
Of those 1,200, or was the 1,200 actually homeowners living in their homes? Or was that just people who owned homes in the community across the board? Some are renting them and some are,
I apologize. You were asking about registered voters. I don't know about registered voters specifically. I just know people in Eufaula, about 30%, I believe was the number for renters. We wouldn't have a way to know specific to registered voters.
I think we have to consider if we're going to look at an EO, it really doesn't just affect the property owner. If I own a rental property, I'm going to pass that cost on, and risk and rent is going to increase. So that also does affect people that live here. So I don't know. I think we have to look at that too. I'm not gonna
I think,
advance.
oh no, I agree with you. I think, and I think that too with like any sales tax too,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I'm all for trying to get a temperature with people, and just at the end of the day, put it to the public. It is a public decision, but I think it's one of the ones that, unfortunately, that we're faced with the council that we have to make to try to move the ball down the court so it doesn't affect the next generation as well, from just not having a lack of planning.
Right.
So,
If Jacob, you kind of need some guidance for what we're thinking. I feel like the people that I represent, if we are choosing something to take to the public to vote, it would be the half cent. That would not get us as much money as we need. But we also have an election coming up for an extension of the county sales tax. But if that doesn't get passed, it's kind of like a wash for the citizens when they do their retail sales tax, correct? Because then it would go back down. The county would go back down to 1.5. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'm not saying let's not pass that, but there's always that possibility.
Well,
that's what I heard.
Well, everyone is really concerned about the roads, and Evelyn's right. It's going to take a lot of money. I feel like the city needs to take responsibility. None of us were here 20 years ago when these streets should have been addressed.
I was.
Well, Roger, what happened?
Oh,
But we
goodness
have to
gracious.
take responsibility now somehow. And I think that we try to do it and consider that we're a low-income community, that yes, we have people that come in and shop, but during the off-season, it is the people that live here that shop. I don't know. So personally, to take something to the public, I feel more comfortable to half cent sales tax.
And
as a homeowner and a renter, an owner of a rental house as well. Frankly, over time, I do shop a lot in town. I do as much shopping in town as I possibly can. It would be less painful for me to see a penny sales tax. Honestly, when I buy groceries, I know that I'm being taxed for the stuff that I'm dealing with, or the use, I'm being able to utilize in town. So I feel like that would be less painful for me in general to pay that, penny sales tax rather than $200 or $300 on one house and $200 or $300 on another. On the rent house, it's the cost of doing business. So I would probably raise the rent, on that. I don't know how significant that would be, but I'm trying to think as a business developer, I'm trying to think in my mind what's going to be easier to sell to the general public, because either one of them, we've got to get a vote on a yes vote, or we can't do either one. So we did take it to the city, to the people before on the penny sales tax, but I didn't even know, much about that until 48 hours before, so I think there's enough business owners and salespeople here that we can come up with, I think you made a really good presentation today and taught me more about bonds and sales tax than I've ever known before. I think we could put something together that would help people understand what we're trying to accomplish. And ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish is what they've asked us to accomplish, and that's to get some decent roads in this town. So what are your feelings on this? Because I'm looking at how quickly we can make something happen. The bond, it sounds like it's going to take half a year just to get ready to do a bond, to get money coming back this direction.
With both of these, they're going to take elections, which is the majority of the time.
Mhm.
A bond election and a sales tax election have the same dates, obviously, as far as that time window. A general obligation bond, if you were to do a sales tax financing, that process is relatively quick. That can happen within a month or so after that. The general obligation bond just takes longer because we have certain statutory deadlines and waiting periods. It would take about, I would say, a month or so longer than a sales tax bank financing. Again, that bank financings are typically quicker because we can just negotiate that directly, but the election is what's taking most of the time.
Gotcha. Can you tell me you've worked with both of these numerous times before, so tell us your.
Well, and first, just so to be fully transparent, you had talked about which one would fully fund the program. To reach the 3.2 million program that Michael talked about over a 5-year, you would have to do both the property tax and the 1 cent sales tax to generate $14 million. The doing either or would meet the 1.6 million per year option. So the fewer roads, just so to be transparent on what it would achieve. They both have advantages and disadvantages. We're in a unique situation, as Chris talked about, being a community with heavy tourism. And I think we've relied on that for a long time with our sales tax approach. And so there's certainly those benefits. I think we already have a lot of sales tax leakage from the locals who will drive to Walmart just because it's cheaper. I don't know that the extra 1% is going to change that. They're going to do it, or they're already doing it. So it's really going to be the out-of-towners. And I think they're coming here, they're going to pay it either way. And then the property tax, the people with lower valued houses are going to pay the lower amount. The people with higher valued houses are going to pay the higher amount. So you have that form of equity in there. So that's also a consideration to take. And if there are people with lake houses that aren't here most of the year, but they have a very nice lake house, that's something to think about. Ultimately, just remember it's up to the voters.
Yeah.
So it's your opportunity to say, how would you like to pay for this? And is this something that you want to pay for?
I think we need to be mindful that the school just passed a bond, and we are also going to be voting on the county tax. So we're
Mhm.
third in line this year for asking people to increase what they're already paying.
Mhm.
So we need to take that into consideration. If we
Yeah,
just
I
come
thought
out and
about
say
that
a
too.
penny, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
What do I think?
Mhm.
I mean, just, this is just the way my brain thinks, is like, if you're going to do something, do it, with the plan of what you want to accomplish. That's always kind of been my approach with things. And so, if I had to lean towards, doing it, then I would lean towards, either the 1% or the GO bond, because that's going to put us in what we want to accomplish. Now, is that what everyone's going to vote for? I don't know. I can't say what people are going to vote for.
I honestly, I would vote for either one because I know that I have to do something. And if my part is paying more on my homes or paying a cent sales tax, I mean, I'm going to do whatever I have to do. But just because I would do that doesn't mean that someone else would.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because I
and-
would not.
Yeah.
Just.
Well, I am a senior citizen.
Mhm.
I'm in my last chapter of life. And we've done all right. With living and expenses and housing and stuff like that. But I can see others my age, it'd be hard to even vote yes on anything.
Correct.
Mhm.
If they're
And I don't know
barely, if
how
they're
many
barely
of us,
staying in their
we still
home.
live in the city limits. I don't know. But
Yeah.
me, I've lived here all my life. I love you, follow. I've been on the council for years. I'm county director for DHS. Work with people, low-income families and stuff like that. And I would vote for either one. But like I say, I'm in my last chapter of life. But others are like me too, but others might be not as fortunate as I have been.
And that, I think you're hitting it, Roger. It's like, we can't speak for everyone. We can just
Right.
put it forward. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
So I guess my question is, would we be considering putting both of these on the ballot to see what people were willing to do? Or are we choosing one to promote? I mean, how would that even work? And if it's not getting us anywhere near the money that we need to make this whole project work, is there, I mean, I know money's money and we need some of it to do, pieces and parts of this, but
I don't
So,
know how you could do that, put both issues on something at one time.
well, two things. You certainly could put both issues and kind of let the voters decide, but they could both pass. And so I would say only put it on there if that was your intent, that you would want both of them to pass. Don't put it on there asking them to choose one or the other.
yeah.
And then the other thing, I was just making it clear that in terms of the city funding all of the improvements, you would need both options passed if the city were 100% funding all of it. Going either or, there's still potential working with Muskogee Nation and other funding opportunities through state funding and Eastern Oklahoma Development District that could help supplement that. It's just not a guarantee, both in the dollar amount and in the timing that it would be received. So I just want to be transparent and clear on that part, that it doesn't mean that we can't still get to where we want to go. It just may take a little longer and it's not guaranteed.
I do like what Tisha said, though, how we're third in line on
Yeah.
something. And so my thought is, if that is the case, my thought would be to go with the sales tax this time around and see where we're at before we went with the property and see where that falls on the property. Because if the county doesn't pass, then that might be something in the future that we could, assess.
I don't think the bond issue that we just passed for the school has even shown up on my,
There-
my
No.
taxes for the year for my homes yet. So
I thought
that,
they
that
didn't
might
increase
be,
it.
did it show up this year?
Yeah, it went up. Yeah, I
Is
just
it-
got a wonderful yellow slip, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
I can't remember what mine was.
But do you know what I mean? That we can see how the county goes, and then if that's something,
Yeah, I think that the sales tax is going to be easier to talk to people about and help them understand what you've asked us to do this, and this is, this is going to take us this far, plus these, corporate projects that we're working on.
so,
It looks like we're looking for, if we do anything this year, it's from June, election date August 19th, and election date would be November.
so my thought is, like, with that in mind, if we're looking at doing, like he was mentioning the GO bond, like if we did the 0.5% sales tax to put it to a vote this year, and then maybe the next year look at the GO bond to put it to a vote, if the county didn't. What y'all's thought on that?
Well, I'd like to see a 1 cent sales tax passed, but I think we probably have a better chance of getting a 0.5 cent passed probably the first time around. That's just my opinion. I don't.
No, I respect your opinion very much. You've seen them pass and you've seen them fail.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
my thought is, I mean, because we could
I mean, with
always,
Our last election, about the one, it was really surprised me. I really thought it would pass.
it was 11
But
votes.
yeah, 11 votes and only 210 voted.
I know it.
I think
we
it's
did-
something
we
we're
did
going
a
to have to
poor
go knock on
job.
doors of our
Yeah,
constituents.
we did
Yeah.
a poor job of ever getting it out there and letting people know what was going on. And
Yeah.
it was so quick and we just did a poor job.
Do you think this go around, I don't know about, I don't think last time we had maps of what would
No, we
be
did not.
addressed.
Yeah.
And this go around, these are draft ones, obviously.
Yeah.
This council would need to review them further and finalize, like, this is our priority list. But this is something tangible that the voters
Yeah.
can see.
That's what I
Okay.
mean by selling it. I'm
Mhm.
not trying to talk somebody into something they don't want to do. But before, all it was somebody telling me that this was going to be a penny for 15 years and it would give us $8 million to do some roads with. That was the whole
Sales pitch.
spiel.
Yeah.
This shows year one that we have a plan. Year 1, year 2, year 3, and by end of year 5, we've basically redone 38 miles of roads, or pretty close. No. We've done the downtown area. Phase 1. We've done phase 1.
That was $45 million for the roads.
Yeah. We've done phase 1
From
of
here to Muskogee, we can't do that.
we've done the roads that are the most, and some of that could go faster, with some of these, networking things that you're doing with folks. But I think if we put together a plan to make sure that everyone knows what we're doing, and I know that it's hard to get excited about asking people for more money, but we've got to figure out a way to start making some of this work, to get some of these roads
Chipping away at the project.
chipping away. Yeah.
What's your thoughts, Tisha?
I would feel comfortable taking a 0.5 cent to the people to vote on. Physical responsibility is a big thing for me, and I don't believe in taxes at all. So I don't like an increase on an already poor community. However, our survey has shown that the majority of people want the roads addressed, and really the only way to do that, getting money from sales tax or an EO. So I think they need to decide. The people need to decide. But I would support the 0.5 cent going to the community.
The one thing, I mean, just with the full 11%, there's no numbers yet.
Yeah,
That's what
it's
Gets-
tough to say what it would do.
Yeah.
To your community. Yeah, but you higher than Shakota, which is obviously right next door. I wish I had an answer.
you're supposed to have the answer.
I
mean-
I thought about it too. I thought, if I'm a tourist, am I gonna drive, up, just a little further away to say 11 cents in
Well, see-
Eufaula or 10 and a half in Shakota? I'm saving 50 cents on $100. Am I really gonna make that drive? I don't know.
And see, that's the thing, like what McAllister, they're looking at increasing to an extra to 11%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a Walmart south of you, you have a Walmart north of you.
Yeah.
And, that's hard when you don't have the numbers.
It's tough. Yeah, I wish there were better comparables that I could have brought today. Unfortunately, this, like I said, it's untrodden now, but it won't be for long. But right now, it is.
I think the numbers that worry me the most is the fact that if we take on that just the half cent, then and I know this wouldn't be relative to the roads, but it would be relative to what else we're spending, is if the people vote not to extend that other 50 cents, then we're trying to figure out how to cover things that you guys are covering with that later. The roads would still be the road money, but just something to think about. Tish, you had brought that up, that we'd be, one would kind of cancel out the other, but I think the 50 cents right now is probably what, or, the half penny rather, is the thing that's going to be the easiest for people to swallow, I think. You think?
I think so.
You think?
That's how, I feel like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately what everyone decides, but we don't have to make the decision today, though, do we?
No, we just got to start getting on the same.
And you can't make the decision today.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I would probably say lean towards the half cent to 1%. I mean, you're in between there.
You know what, Jacob? I think I learned something from our guest today about the use tax. I think that we need to promote that whenever we do an online order, because I know so many people that do the Walmart delivery orders, and we all just assumed our sales tax dollars were going to Shakota, but they're not actually. They're coming to Eufaula, which makes me feel much better about it.
doesn't it?
Yes, it really does.
Oh,
When you do the delivery orders and stuff?
That could
Oh,
be
I
a
didn't realize
post.
that either.
I don't know how to do that. I'm a senior
Amazing.
citizen.
Once you figure it out, Roger, you'll do
I
it.
don't know. I don't want to know. how
Okay,
to.
so another quick question. Looking at if the county doesn't approve their other 0.5%, would that be something y'all would be interested in looking at the following year for
I
the
think it gives
GOP
us-
bond?
Yeah. Mhm.
I think that would give us room if
Mhm.
that was the case.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thinking about next year instead of this year, you think this year.
Well, because
That's
like
what
Tisha,
happened.
because we are third in line on the same vote. I could almost take it to the bank that it would fail, if the other ones did, especially since the school just got passed as well. So I would think that could be something that we could look at next year. Because that would put us,
Have progressed in the work that
Correct.
we've
That's it.
done
That's-
here in town.
that's
We
my
would-
point.
Proof of work.
Yeah, right now we're selling them on maps. By this time next year, we'd be showing them what's being accomplished,
so that would be something on the table.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think so for
I
me.
do too.
would this council like another workshop session to discuss this more?
I would say after
I think we're pretty much all
Yeah.
in agreement, except, we need to talk to our missing.
I think that would
panel
be,
member.
are you talking about in the future, like next year or?
Or to discuss this plan more, or do you want a resolution brought at the next council meeting or further
I
discussion?
think that we need to get together after we
Mhm.
see how McAllister's
Yes.
vote goes and how the vote that we have here for the county goes, if it passes or not.
Because,
Then we can kind of
no, I agree
have a
with you.
plan.
Because if if McAllister goes to 11%,
And it
I would,
passes,
I would feel way more comfortable saying, hey, 11%.
you would have more.
Yeah,
Yes.
Because then you're staying in line with the ones, your competition directly
Mhm.
south of you. Would you agree?
I'm not agreeing to 11%, but I do know.
You saw how that happened, though.
Well, I think it would also, we had talked about if we're gonna, when is the first time that someone could vote on this? When is the first open election?
So-
It's right here.
August 25th.
August, okay.
If this
I just need a
council,
way to give us time to
But-
get the word out and the information.
yes, this council would have to act,
June the 10th.
yes. The county's election is June 16th,
Oh,
so that would be your conflict.
okay.
Waiting
I
on
thought it was
that.
This April.
When is McAllister? April.
So then the next time would be November 3rd,
Yes.
So we need to do.
which will probably be a big turnout election, I'm guessing,
Yes.
Think about August
That's a
19th.
good call.
which can be good and bad.
Yeah, it could go either way.
Because
Well,
it's hard to get focus on a local issue,
Mhm.
but it also normally has the highest turnout. So
I think if we worked hard at it, we could turn out the public, if we got the information out, told them, we heard you, this is how we're moving, trying to
Yeah.
move forward.
Have a
But I do
county-
think it's a good idea to wait and see if
I
McAllister
agree.
is, goes to that.
Tisha agreed too. She just didn't say it.
She did? She just didn't say it.
Have a townhouse
I
meeting
agree.
where people can come and we can
Yeah.
talk
Yeah,
about it.
that's not a bad idea.
So I would probably say a meeting after McAllister to see.
after
And bring a resolution of either the 0.5% or the 1%.
after McAllister, but not after the county,
Right.
or would
And you said, I thought the county's was April 7th as well, but it's not.
June 16th
June
is
16th.
when theirs is.
I would say after the county as well,
Oh, I thought it was April too.
because then you would be planning next year.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
So 2 of them.
Well,
I don't
do you
think
think
that's
a
the way I-
workshop would be good for the council to discuss after those 2 elections? Revisit?
Then you could also bring a resolution too.
Yeah.
Yeah, then
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll plan either late June, mid-July in there. So, okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Mhm.
Everyone good?
Yes.
I feel like we're all kind of all on the same page, which is fantastic. So I think that's it. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I will, go ahead. You make the motion.
Motion
and
to
I'll-
adjourn.
I'll second.
Evelyn, did you second?
Yes.
Okay.
Did I just agree?
You second.
Yeah, I second.
Penny sauce.
Okay.
You like how that?
Yeah. Barton motion.
Did you-
I'm trying to close you. That's a closing argument.
You
right?
like that, didn't you?
You agree, right?
Councilmember Gully,
Yeah.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Morgan,
Yes,
Mayor Hickman,
Yes. Okay, we are adjourned.
motion approved.
I have to go train.
Are you teaching class tonight?
Yeah.
What are you teaching?
I train an autistic man. Oh. We exercise together 2 days a week.
Oh,
And,
how nice.
yeah, he's 40.
Oh,